Okay, so I was going to upload, but I actually had an interesting experience this morning during today's tour that I want to include, just because it's related. Today's tour was basically about the Nazi Party in Nuremberg, kind of as it was gaining steam, as Hitler was becoming more and more powerful, and the Nazi rallies that were held in Nuremberg, and like if you've ever seen, I'm sure everyone has seen like those, the footage of like the parades and like the huge rallies with like the endless crowds and stuff like that. Like that's Nuremberg, So the tour was about that, and when I went down to the lobby of my hotel, I'm all anxious to talk to my tour guide about the history, tell me the history of your home country. This is my favorite thing, like to just like connect with the people who are like guiding me through my experience of the country, and like really getting the kind of like the inside look, and using a tour guide is more than just their job, but as like a real way of connecting to the country. So tour guide shows up and he's Brazilian. Okay. So this is a guy who moved to Germany like 4 or 5 years ago, and he was a great tour guide. He knew a lot about the history. He knew a lot about he knew a ton about what the tour is about, everything he needed to know, everything, and it was a good learning experience. But when I asked, like, okay, so what's up with being a tour guide in Germany when you're from Brazil, he said right away, because the Germans won't do it. Okay, so just disclaimer: all this is, of course, anecdotal. I cannot possibly pass judgment on on like what the actual situation is here. I'm just reporting kind of what I see and experience and what I hear. And so this tour guide, this Brazilian guy, he talks to me about how the Germans basically don't like acknowledging any of this, and they will, and they do, but like it's not what they want to dwell on. And he's married to a German woman, and he said when he got to Germany, he didn't know the history himself, and he would be driving through Nuremberg, and he'd like go past like some of these sites, and he'd ask his wife like what was that? And she would say, oh, that's the Zeppelin field. And he'd go, okay, so what is it? And she would say something like, it's nothing really, it's just boring. And he started learning about the history on his own. Like he started doing his own research because he really wanted to know more about the places he had moved to, and about his town, his new home. And he would try to talk to his wife about it, and every time she would be like, I'm not interested in this stuff, I don't want to talk about this. And yeah, so this is anecdotal, but he was also telling me about how, like, we saw school children on trip, like on a school, well, so not school, it was more like late high school, college age kids on a trip in some of these sites. And I asked him about it, and he said, I asked him what the education was like in Germany about their past, and he said it's very, very thorough, and they learn everything, and they're those children that you saw, they're here because they have to be. Everyone is required to do tours like this, and then after school they forget everything. Okay. So this also, it was interesting because it brought up something that someone told me right before the trip, and like when I say right before, I mean like literally at that wedding 30 minutes before I left for the airport. And she's talking about how when she went to Germany, she visited all kind of like the main museums and stuff like that, and then she also visited a couple places that were kind of off the beaten path, places that weren't usual stops for like foreign tourists. And she talked about how she was in a place that had like World War II planes on display, and all the swastikas had been removed. And the placards like didn't, it was talking about the like these planes technically, and didn't mention the Nazis, but she knew, from her own knowledge that these were Nazi warplanes, And another instance that she told me about was that she was in this like fancy place, like one of these like, it was like an apartment or some kind of palace, or some room that was very ornate and on display. There's a lot of artwork and like gold and silver and stuff like that. and then out of the way, tucked into a corner, like seriously could totally miss this, was a short blurb about how this is all wealth that was seized from Jews. So this is also anecdotal, but the idea totally was in line with what this guy, the impression this guy was telling me, that you have these big museums and the memorials and the sites and history that's like out for the public to see, but that's for the public. That's for I'm not saying just display. It's for people who are visiting the country to see. And I asked my tour guide, how often do you have Germans come on this tour? And he said he's been doing this for like 3 years, and he's had I think he said 2 German couples who went on the tour with him. Maybe it was 3. And like the idea is just basically that like it's not like your everyday German thinks about this stuff, and this is not something that's on his mind, and it may not ever be on his mind. So that said, if this impression is true, and again, I don't know what the actual situation is, but it does put things in an interesting place, because it means that they're feeling shame, and it's a widespread feeling of shame. And like there's of course like a healthy way to feel shame and an unhealthy way to feel shame, and like a healthy kind of desire to cover things up, and or I guess I should say there's an unhealthy desire to cover things up, and then there's a healthy type of desire of like we want people to know about what Germany is now, and we acknowledge the past on the inside, and we want to make Germany into something we can be proud of for good reasons, so that when the world sees Germany, then they're not just thinking of goose-stepping soldiers and dead Jews, and then also of course there's positive, there's healthy and unhealthy reasons to feel ashamed of something, but all that is separate from the phenomenon itself, that that this is something that they're that is still very present, but it's in this form. It's in the form of like this shame and this instinct to hide. So that's interesting. I don't know what to make of that per se, but that is it's not like it completely contradicts everything that I talked about in the first part of the video. It's another side of this whole process. And the other thing which is interesting about this is that, and this is something which I think is really important, how they relate to the past is separate. It's a separate matter from how they conduct themselves today when it comes to these same flaws. And in terms of that, Germany today is as multicultural as it comes. Huge immigrant populations in the big cities, very visible. You see tons of black people, and you see tons of Muslims, and and there's pride flags everywhere from Pride Month, still, and if even if they don't think about the Holocaust, like they do know what Jews are, that is still true, that they know that we're just another religion, and religions are accepted in Germany, and Judaism is something which like I was just at the little kosher market here in Munich, that is something which they now relate to Jews as what we are, as another religion, another type of person, another kind of lifestyle, nothing crazy, nothing threatening, something just to learn about and appreciate, that's it. So I just wanted to kind of use this experience to augment what I've been talking about earlier. So tomorrow is a tour of Munich, and that's also going to be about the rise of the Third Reich and the Nazi Party, and I do believe that that's going to be with an actual German tour guide. So excited to share that one too.